For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sam Wallen. I'm a board member on the Racine Taxpayers Association, and we are proud to hold this event. I must say that I'm very impressed with the turnout. But before I go anywhere, I think it's important to note that we are a nonpartisan nonprofit. We are focused on issues that matter to voters. We are not focused on a party, but nevertheless, we're proud to hold this debate because we believe the voters need to know the truth about fiscal issues that matter to them, particularly in the issue of taxes. As the Racine Taxpayers Association, we encourage governments to use their budgets properly and wisely, and we believe that taxpayers should deserve to have a low tax rate and a flat tax rate. And so we're not partisan, we're not aligned, we don't care who does it, we just want someone to support the issues that matter to the voters. So with that said, I think it's important that we have this debate so that you, the voters, get to know the issues that matter to you. Unfortunately, before we go into this debate, I have to list several rules. The first one is that each candidate will receive the same number of questions. The second is that each candidate will be requested to address every question. Third, each candidate will have an equal amount of time offered to him or her to address each question. 4, positions of candidates at the front tables is established by coin flip. That coin flip has already been done, and Wanggaard will proceed first. 6, candidates must adhere to the time limits as explained in the format letter. 5, no personal questions will be used. 8, questions from the audience must be written down. 7, candidates may ask questions. 8, direct verbal questions by one candidate to the other must be consistent with their original question. 9, after the original answer and response, anytime a candidate chooses to pass in his turn, that ends the question, and we will turn to proceed to the next question. Now, I just want to point out that the people you should be delivering your handwritten questions to should be Ken Brown and Lisa Bell. They are over here at the front table. We appreciate their service tonight. My name is Sam Wallen. I'll be the moderator. After they have filtered the questions, then they'll hand them to me, and I will ask them to the candidates. Each candidate will start off with a 2-minute introduction, followed by each candidate will have a 2-minute response to every single question, and then they'll have a 2-minute closing. George will be happy to do the time. So be careful and keep a lookout for that sign. The candidates will be using that to guide their time. Also important to note that the cameraman will be Gary Alvarado. Raise your hand.
Hey, Gary.
And remember, when asking questions, that you try to ask yes or no questions. No offense, but politicians are very classic in evading questions, and we try to treat all politicians equally, just like they treat the voters very equally. So, therefore, try and keep your question concise, and we will try and ask it the best way possible, and try to make sure that question can apply to both candidates equally. And for that, we will start the debate. Van Wanggaard, would you like to come up here? And that mic is transportable, so you can pull it off. And you have a 2-minute introduction.
Well, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me back there okay? Yeah. Okay, my name is Van Wanggaard, and I was a senator from the 21st District. I served from 2010 to 2012 when I was recalled during the recall of Governor Walker and myself for supporting the governor's reforms. I was a police officer for 30 years in the city of Racine. When I retired from the being a police officer, I ran for the Racine County Board, served there for 10 years, and then ran for the Senate in 2010 and was elected. I have my wife here tonight, Mary Jo, of 41 years. I have two children, or I should say young adult kids who are now adults. Kathleen, who's here tonight, she's a teacher. She's married to John, and my son Josh, a small business owner, is married to Amy, and of course I have my newest granddaughter. I am at this point in my life looking at continuing a job that I started that has not been finished. And I'm looking forward to getting back to working with the governor to continue the reforms that we started when I was serving in the Senate. I feel that we can continue to change our state and make this state the spearhead of the changes in our country. Smaller government, less taxes, and fewer regulations. So with that, I'll turn the mic over to Jonathon.
Thanks, man. Well, hello, my name is Jonathon Steitz. I'm running for State Senate here in the 21st District, obviously. I want to thank Ken and the Racine Taxpayers Association for putting on this forum. I've said, from the beginning when I decided to run for this office that it was important that we have good, healthy debate over policy, and I really appreciate this opportunity, and I appreciate all of you for coming out. I'll start by introducing my wife, Kelly. She's right here. We've been married 19 years this summer. I know what you're all thinking, and you're right, we did get married when we were 13 years old, so that's how that happened. We have 4 kids. They are ages 11, 9, 6, and 4. Keep life busy and interesting, but give me a real sense of urgency for some of the things that we need to get done in this state. My background has been all in the private sector. I've never held public office, and I think that's a good thing. I used to own my own business for 7 years. I had the opportunity to go back to school, and I sold my business. I got my law degree and my MBA from Northwestern. Since that time, I've worked at a law firm in capital markets, including 3 years over in London. And about 2 years ago, I moved up to a financial services firm called Baird up in Milwaukee and currently work there in investment banking. I think the one thing that we desperately need in state government, and especially in the state senate, is more people that really have a good business background, that understand business, understand finance and accounting. And I hope that one of the things I'll be able to portray to you today is why I think that's so important. I'm running for this seat because I think we have such a unique opportunity in the state of Wisconsin right now. We've obviously come a long way under Governor Walker in the last 4 years. A lot of great things have gotten done, but we have a lot of work to still do. Wisconsin is still one of the highest tax states in the country. I don't think that we're being as competitive as we could be, and we've got to fix some things. We have an opportunity right now at this time because of the strong majority we have in the Assembly and because of the great governor that we have, but we've got to get things in the Senate fixed. As you know, over and over again, good, solid, conservative legislation gets held up in the Senate. So thank you very much. I look forward to a healthy debate today.
Now, it's important to note that as these candidates are asking questions, you can continuously come up here and deliver your questions as long as they're handwritten and I can read them, and that is a very critical part. So, as I said before, Van Wanggaard will be the first to start off this debate. And each candidate has 2 minutes to answer each question. And the first question that one of the people in this tonight gave would be, would you have done anything differently with Act 10, and what proposals do you have going forward?
Well, as far as Act 10 goes, I voted for Act 10. I supported Act 10. I voted for Act 10. I supported Act 10. I was recalled because of my vote with Act 10. Actually, my opponent has said that they twisted my arm to vote for Act 10 and that I had watered it down, but that is absolutely not true. As a matter of fact, I was the third legislator in the entire legislature to vote in the affirmative for Act 10 during the Joint Survey Committee and Joint Finance Committee, Joint Survey Committee for Retirement Systems, to be able to allow that legislation to go forward to be voted on in either house. Or as a result of that, 2 days later, it went to the Joint Finance Committee and was passed through with enhancements that were put into place as a result of identifying unintended consequences that happened during the Act 10 process. I had worked with the governor to strengthen the bill. I have been told that we watered it down when actually what we did is we created a series of changes or amendments to the bill that allowed it to be strengthened. There was something said about the Schultz-Wanggaard proposal, which was an alternate proposal that Senator Schultz put forward. I did not have anything to do with that proposal. That actually was Dale's proposal. He asked me to provide information for collective bargaining. I did so, and it became our proposal. I will tell you this, that the sunset provision he had in there, I would never have voted for it. I would never go through having the death threats that were put forward for my family, myself, and the threats to kill my daughter's dog. I would vote for it again and support it again, and we need to continue that process of bringing our state forward. Thank you.
Great. Well, I want to say, first of all, Van, I appreciate your vote on Act 10. I give Van all the credit in the world that he voted for Act 10. It was the right thing to do. The bottom line is this election has got to be about who's going to be best going forward and who's going to be the best for this district over the next 4 years. And I think that I have the right vision for this district, and we'll get into that through the next questions, I hope. But sorry, I'm not sure what that was. But Act 10 obviously is the question here. So here are my concerns with Act 10, and some of the things I want to say about the record there. When you go back and look at the multiple news reports that talk about the fact that Van was working with Dale Schultz to craft some compromise, I have no doubt that happened. Now, whether or not he was on the sunset provision and so forth, he has denied that. There are news reports from back in 2011 that put him with that, and that's fine. There was no denying it at the time. He has now, and I understand that. My biggest concerns, though, really go to the provisions that he added, that he insisted on having for civil service protections. And my background is all in the private sector. That's the perspective I come from. I disagree with Van on the civil service protections. We have the workforce development plan. We have a department that hears grievances from private sector employers if they're wrongfully terminated, discriminated against. I've got the form here if anybody's interested in seeing it. That applies to both private sector and public sector workers. And for too long in Wisconsin and really across the nation, there has been two different playbooks for private sector workers and for public sector workers. And we need to get away from that. That's what Act 10 was essentially about, that we should be leveling the playing field and the public sector needs to come in line with where we are in the private sector. And I think Van, by insisting on these civil service protections, went the opposite direction of where I would have gone with that. And I think, again, he has a completely different perspective than I do, having been in the public sector his whole career. And I think that I would be working to reform civil service protections and not looking to extend them. Do I answer the next question first?
Yes.
Okay.
No worries. One thing I will say before we ask the next question is that if we could eliminate the shouting and the yelling and any booing that people might have, that way we could continue the flow of debate and everyone could get their voice equally said.
Thanks, Sam.
So now I'm going to ask a question that's very similar to that, and it is, do you believe public and private sector employees should have different civil service protections?
All right. Well, I think I just answered that question. So obviously I don't, and I'm going to elaborate a little bit more. The private sector employees that are wrongfully terminated in their opinion, again, there's a process in place both at the state level and the federal level. On the state level, there are protections for, obviously discrimination based on race, based on sex, based on age, based even on sexual orientation, and it includes to some political activity. I don't think anybody, private sector or public sector, should be fired for political activity, and there's some arguments to be made that maybe we need to strengthen some of those protections, but again, I think that those need to be applied to both the private sector and the public sector. We can't afford to keep having two sets of playbooks for the public sector and another set of playbook for the private sector. I just think it's the wrong way to go. Act 10, I want to go back and just, while I have a little extra time, elaborate on that. I think part of the question is, what would I have done differently? I think one of the things that was really eye-opening to me was reading Governor Walker's book. And, a lot of you know I ran against Bob Wertz back in 2011. I did that because I so believed in Act 10. I believed that what we were doing was heading in the right direction. But one of the things that Governor Walker points out in his book is the way that Dan Kapinga, who also lost his recall election, how he went before the caucus and he defended Act 10. And he knew that the way that his district was drawn, he was going to probably lose his election over Act 10. But he was able to stand up. He defended it. He said this is the right thing to do. He gave a very principled response based on the fact that public sector unions, there's some inherent flaws in them, which is also the way that I talked about Act 10 and public sector unions back in 2011 during my recall election. And that's been one of my concerns with Van, is that there wasn't a lot of talk about the inherent problems with public sector unions and why Act 10 was so necessary.
I guess this was just Actually, I think civil service protection should be the same for both. And let's go back to Act 10 again, because we had, Jonathon has misspoken with exactly what the circumstances were. What I did is I identified that there were issues in the collective bargaining that stripped out the protections for the little guy for the grievance process, discipline process, unfair termination from employment, and workplace safety. I discussed that with the governor, and the governor, over about an hour and plus phone call, two of them actually, agreed that that was a great catch. It was never his intention to remove that. So what the governor did is the governor and I worked together with his staff, and they included civil service protections because the governor thought everybody had civil service protections, when in fact they didn't. So the governor and I worked together on that. I worked with Eric Shute, the governor's deputy chief, and we did make those changes and those proposals to the Joint Finance Committee. And that strengthened the bill because that put those protections in place for the little guy. You, and you. Everybody who's here that could be terminated because they're wearing the wrong color shirt today. That is not the way things should be, and I don't think our country's like that, and I don't think that we should be like that. So those protections were put in place for the little guy, and I'm proud that we did that because it did strengthen the bill, and it's Dan Kapanke who voted. He was actually the first vote in the legislature to vote in favor 2 days before it went to the Finance Committee. Dan Kramer was the second vote, and I was the third vote, voting in the affirmative for Act 10. So I stepped out ahead of time. The issue with Senator Schultz, actually when that situation came up, he did have the opportunity to not put my name on there, but did put my name on there. The sunset clause was never anything that I would have gone through twice. Anybody in their right mind who was in Madison at the time that this happened, or any legislator that went through this, would know that you would not want to go through this twice.
So now we're going to shift gears a little bit and address another issue that's important, especially to people in southeastern Wisconsin, and that is, do you believe Scott Walker should approve the Hard Rock Casino, and would you?
Absolutely. I started supporting the casino project in about 2003 when I was on the Racine County Board of Supervisors. We completed a resolution in support of that project. When I was elected to the state senate, I wrote at least 2 letters in support to the Bureau of Indian Affairs to get it off their desk and get it moving. And I have spoken with the governor on numerous occasions to get that project going. This is a big project for southeastern Wisconsin. This is not a casino. This is an international destination. It's an international destination that we can be proud of. There's 3,000 jobs attached to that international destination, in addition to about 1,500 jobs that'll be construction jobs. Now, while some people say this is not a good economic driver, I think this is a good economic driver because it puts about 4,500 people to work, and they're going to be good jobs. There are going to be jobs that are going to be family supporting jobs. There are going to be jobs that are going to be supply line jobs that are going to add to this, and this is only the first part of the phase of a $525 million project. So I am looking forward to seeing this project going forward, and I hope that the governor makes that choice sooner rather than later.
I am also in favor of the casino. I think that it'll be a great thing for the economic development of this area. I think especially with Hard Rock being behind it now, we really have the opportunity to become a destination, and it'd be so much more than just a casino. So I think that's a great thing. I have in the past, I've been very consistent about this, said that we need to enter this with some bit of caution. That the fact is that with casinos and with gambling, there are adverse effects on the local area. I think that's pretty well documented, and I want to make sure that we have the right resources available for our local, police and so forth, that we are taking care of that and don't put an extra burden on our local municipalities. But on balance, I'm absolutely in favor of the casino, and I hope that Governor Walker will approve it. I know that he's working hard trying to get the tribes to come to an agreement on their own, and hopefully that'll happen. But regardless, I certainly encourage and have talked to the governor about the fact that we need to have that casino approved for the area. One thing, since I have some extra time and I think we're allowed to do this, I'm going to go back and say one thing that, I fundamentally disagree with Van on, going back to the civil service protections. He said it protects you and you and you and you, and it doesn't. It protects the public sector workers. I would suspect the majority of you are like myself. We work in the private sector. We're at-will employees, and when I get fired for whatever reason, I don't have a grievance procedure. I don't have all this red tape that I get to take advantage of. Having those kinds of civil service protections, in my opinion, just perpetrates the problem that we've had in the public sector, that once you have a public sector job, you're kind of set for life. It's very hard to get fired. And again, I think that we need to level that playing field and not have two playbooks. We need to have one playbook that applies to both the private sector and the public sector, and those civil service protections didn't do that. They applied only to the public sector workers.
You're up next.
Sorry. We'll get this down by the end of the time.
Okay, our next question is, should we abolish the state income tax?
Yes. No, that's, do you want more information? No. I have, early on, I've come out, and this is one of the areas, I've really tried to put forth a vision for what I want to do the next 4 years, and I think hopefully you'll see, tonight I want to portray a lot of that vision, but, I work with a group called the Heartland Institute, which is a free market think tank. I'm one of their tax and budget policy advisors. I've spent a lot of time studying tax policy. I've also had the opportunity, because of my jobs, to really understand and be in the room when businesses are making decisions that are really driven by tax policy. So I get how this works. And so I have said very early on that my long-term goal for the state of Wisconsin would be to eliminate the income tax. And the reason for that is that I think that the income tax, more than anything else, is what suppresses economic development. And if you look at the stats, there's 9 states that have no income tax. Those states have far outpaced the rest of the country as far as job growth and economic development. I want Wisconsin to be competitive. Now, I recognize that that is a long-term goal. It's not going to happen, in my first term in the state Senate. I do have some very specific things that I think that we need to do immediately when I get elected. First of all, under Governor Walker, we've gone from 5 income tax brackets to 4. I want to see that collapse down to 2. Governor Doyle put in a 7.65% top-tier tax rate that is a job killer. It hits small businesses, and we've got to get rid of that. So I want to get rid of that top tax rate. I want to collapse down to 2, continue to make our tax code flatter and fairer. I want to eliminate the corporate income tax. Right now in the state of Wisconsin, we have this manufacturing tax credit, which is overall a good thing, I think, but the bottom line is that basically manufacturers don't pay income tax, all other corporations do. I don't think the government should be in the place where they're picking and choosing which sectors get special benefits like that. So it's working for the manufacturing sector. We're growing in that area. Let's extend that to the rest of our businesses so that we continue to grow all sectors of the economy. And at some point, I'll tell you my other 2 ideas that I want to get done immediately, but I'm out of time for now.
Question, should we eliminate it?
The question was, should we abolish the state income tax?
Abolish the state income tax. I think that is a really, really fine idea to do that, but it's not very realistic right at this point. In order to do that, we would have to eliminate all the exemptions. And where do you start? Do we eliminate exemptions that are like food and medicine and those types of things that we don't pay taxes on now? Because if we don't do that, our tax rate is going to jump from what it is now, 5.1%, to between 11.2 and 13.5% for a state sales tax in order to be able to replace that. You just can't go in and take something away and not replace it with something. So my thought is this. I think we should look at focusing on areas that we can make a difference. I would like to see us eliminate taxes on senior citizens' pensions. We're driving too many people out of the state of Wisconsin, going to other states that don't have that, and they're taking with their resources and spending those resources in other economies. They are leaving their families, and in some cases, the families are following with them. So that creates a drain on people staying here and growing here and continuing to be here. I would also like to see us eliminate property taxes. Totally. I think we can do an elimination of statewide property tax. I think that's probably a doable thing and in the immediate near future. And if we work on doing those things, we can flatten the tax rate. And, you know, in Indiana, they have one tax rate, flat rate. It's one. I think we should get down to one bracket. That would be my goal, to flatten it, reduce it, and continue to make it realistic. But to just come in and say we're going to eliminate it, I don't think that we can do that at this point.
On a similar note, the next question that one of the people asked is, should we eliminate the state debt and reduce the Wisconsin budget? And how would you accomplish this?
Well, eliminate the state debt. We actually eliminated a big chunk of that $3.6 billion debt that we had when I actually started in 2010. And we also, by enacting Act 10 that I voted for and supported, we dealt with some of the structural issues that caused that $3.6 billion debt. Should we continue to eliminate things that are debt? Absolutely. But I also think that we need to look at what's driving that. And a lot of that is waste and fraud and how we are spending our dollars. There's things that we can do to change that. We could deal with transportation issues, and we could deal with making our state a right-to-work state. We could deal with that with eliminating prevailing wage. There's a lot of things that we can do to make that happen. So I think that we need to look at all areas. They're all on the table, and I think that most of our constituents would appreciate us not taking more money out of their pocket but leaving it in the local economies.
All right, I got a lot to cover in 2 minutes. I guess I want to go back to the question before that, and I guess I'm really confused. Van said eliminating the income tax wouldn't be doable, but the property tax would be. We actually collect more in property tax across the state than we do in income tax. It's 9.8 to 6.4 billion, so I'm not sure where that follows. Certainly, if we eliminate the income tax, and the reason I'm really focused on income tax and not and property tax as much is because when you do the studying of different states and the different states' tax regimes, it's really the income tax that's the driver of the economic development. And when you reduce income taxes, you start seeing job creation and job growth and businesses wanting to go there. Obviously, I think property tax is too high too. I want to eliminate, I'm like Milton Friedman, I will eliminate any income, any tax, anytime, for any reason. So we'll work on that too. But that's the reason I'm really focused on income tax. Sam, remind me what the question is. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Oh, what would I do to reduce spending, debt and stuff? Again, just a small correction. The $3.6 billion was not debt, that was a deficit. It's very, very different. The deficit meant that projecting, that's how far the shortfall was, but that was never like bonded debt. And so that's an important distinction to remember. I do think that we have too much debt. That's one of my concerns in the state, is that even though we've got the state going in the right direction, each of our budgets has continued to increase. We've continued to take on more debt. And I think one of the ways that we really fix that is by getting the right people in the legislature. I have been very impressed in the Assembly with, some of you may be familiar with the CPA caucus. Again, Dale Kuyanga, he found, and some of the other guys, I don't want to just say it was all Dale, but they found this extra $1 billion that the UW wasn't really disclosing. And they found that because they have the experience to look at income statements, and they said, the UW system, as much as you're complaining about you're hurting, you're actually generating money. Where is all this money? And they started asking the questions, and suddenly, they found that the UW system was sitting on a huge amount of money. Again, we need more people like that in the government that understand business, can read a balance sheet, and can find these kinds of issues and fix them. So I'm absolutely in favor of continuing to reduce spending, and I will try to give you some more ideas on that in a few minutes.
Okay, the next question that was just asked is, how do you feel about right to work?
I don't know how many of you have been here. I have been out very vocal. I think I'm one of the few candidates around the state that is adamantly running on right to work. I've been very clear about that. I think that it's really about making Wisconsin competitive, and I'm focused on making sure that we have the kind of environment that we're creating jobs. And I think right to work is so important for this state. We're competing against the Midwestern states. Right now we're lagging behind, and there are states like Indiana, Michigan, Iowa are all now right to work. We've got to get this done in Wisconsin. The only way we get this done is to get the right conservatives in the Senate. If you, again, going back to the statistics, the states that have been right to work over the last 10 years have increased jobs by over 15%. States that are forced unionization like Wisconsin right now have increased jobs less than half of that, at about 7%. I've got all these stats on my website, as well as some links to some resources that you're welcome to take a look at. You hear a lot about, we got to be careful about right to work. Is that going to be a dangerous topic for the Republicans? That is not who I am. That is not the kind of legislator I'm going to be. I think that when we have issues like this, we need to stand up. We need to declare what the right position is. We need to defend that. It's not that hard to do it. And then we need to make the hard decisions to make it happen. And we're going to be, bottom line is, whether we're openly campaigning on right to work or not, we're going to be attacked for it. It's part of the Republican platform. Let's get the kind of candidates, the kind of legislators that are really going to stand up and fight for these issues and drive these issues forward. I'm going to be that guy from the 21st District, and I think this is a really important issue to keep Wisconsin competitive. Do I have a few more seconds? Stop. I have 15? All right, my two other ideas for income tax that I never got to immediately. I want to eliminate income tax on everybody 65 and older. I think we can do that quickly. As Van already said, we have a huge issue in this state with people declaring their residency in another state. The other thing that I can't believe we haven't done yet, we still have a marriage penalty in our tax code. Time to get rid of that.
How do you feel about right to work for Wisconsin?
I have said from the beginning that I don't believe anyone should have to belong to a union in order to have a job, period. When you look at things and you look at what's happened in other states like Michigan, if Michigan can do it, Wisconsin can do it. I remember when I was in the Senate and we were doing a confirmation process on Eloise Anderson, who is a pretty well-known Republican that's dealt with labor issues. She said to me, she says, if Wisconsin really wants to get going and they really want to start making a difference, we need to be a right-to-work state, and that's what will make things happen. So she was right. That's exactly what needs to happen, and I am fully in support of that.
The next question is, do you support extending the 794 highway to continue through Racine and Kenosha counties?
Yes, I do. I think the 794 access is an integral part to helping Racine get back on its feet, but it also helps Caledonia and Mount Pleasant. And by bringing 794 in, we already have the roadway improved pretty much all the way up to where it turns through Caledonia. And I think that this would be an advantage not only to the city of Racine, but to individuals that want to, bypass and come into Caledonia and Mount Pleasant. So yes, I would support that.
I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
Honestly, it's not an issue I have looked at in a lot of depth. I want to make sure I understand all the, the ramifications behind that. as a matter of philosophy, obviously, I'm a small government guy. I do think that one of the things that the government needs to do is deal with infrastructure, and I think it's important that we have the right infrastructure. I think it's a huge economic driver that we have, the right roadways in place in order to fuel development. And I know that obviously as we grow, we need to continue looking at the roadways into Milwaukee. I work in Milwaukee. I drive them every day, so I'm obviously excited to see the highway getting widened and all that kind of stuff. I do think that anytime we have infrastructure projects like this, we need to make sure that there is local input involved. I know that's been a big issue with the roundabouts, and I think it's not a matter of whether I'm pro roundabout or anti roundabout or pro 794 or anti 794. It's a matter of let's make sure that we have real local input in these decisions, and that it's not just something that's dictated to us from the state. While I have a few extra seconds, I'll take all the time I have. But one other issue, not to pound too much on this income tax thing, but this is obviously something I'm very passionate about. Van said that if we eliminate the income tax, we'd have to see sales tax rates at 11 to 13%. Van, I just disagree. And it sounds like a Democrat, and Democrat arguments. They would not have to do that. Well, obviously, when you have economic development, it's just like Reagan used to say, the pie is not fixed, the pie grows. And when we eliminate the income tax, I really believe that we will see the state take off like we would never have expected as far as economic development, job growth, and that really pays for the tax reduction rather than feeling like we have to transfer the tax to other areas. Every time.
We're going to switch stands a little bit. Since it's halfway time, I just want to remind you, if you have any questions, feel free to write them down and bring them up to this table here. But now let's proceed to our next question. The Racine-Kenosha school districts are among the worst ranked in the state. What needs to be done, and where do you stand on Common Core?
All right, 2 minutes. I'll talk fast. Education is something I'm very passionate about. Obviously, I have four young kids that are all in the school system. Well, the fourth will be soon next year. I've been a huge advocate for school choice. I have been adamantly opposed to Common Core, and I've been very consistent on that. I have been really influenced by a man named Milton Friedman, who I'm sure a lot of you know. He's kind of the father of school choice. He was writing in the 50s about school vouchers and the need to have school choice. My philosophy, and it's something that Milton Friedman really advocated, is that we need to be funding students, not school districts. I think vouchers are a start, but I think we need to move beyond vouchers, and I'm a huge advocate for education savings accounts. And what that means is that when we have in Wisconsin, we're paying about $12,000, give or take, depending on kind of how you use the stats, but $12,000 per student. With an education savings account plan, that $12,000 is actually be put into an account that the parent has the control over, and we empower parents to make the right decision for their kids. And whether that be that they go to a public school, whether they go to a charter school, whether they go to a private school, or whether they're homeschooled, they get the same amount of funding. If a parent can get a great education for their child for $9,000, and we've decided to put $12,000 as the right number, then that extra money rolls over and is available to the student for higher education costs and so forth. Obviously, again, this is a big idea. These are not things that are going to happen overnight, but this is the direction I want to move this state in. Arizona's already going there. There's no reason that Wisconsin can't be there as well. And really the biggest benefit to this, in my opinion, is that you finally introduce a free market competition to the system. And I think the only thing that's going to save our public schools, including Kenosha and Racine, is when there's a free market competition and when parents have the ability to vote with their feet and put their children in whatever school they think is best.
The question was, the Racine-Kenosha school districts are among the worst ranked in the state. What needs to be done, and where do you stand on Common Core?
Racine and Kenosha are having difficulties. We all know that. We all know that the issues are not just one issue. There's a whole bunch of things that are affecting that. We don't have parents involved. Sometimes we don't have teachers involved. We have a state and federal government that are sometimes stepping in and shouldn't be stepping in. And then we have Common Core that's being added to this. The Common Core question comes down to it should be repealed. Leah Vukmeyer did a bill here in this past session that I think was a good bill that would have done that, but it didn't make it through the process. And that would have repealed Common Core. I went to a seminar, Dr. Duke Pesta, and found out that there were all kinds of things in Common Core that I don't think most people really believe or understand that they're actually there and how they're going to affect the kids that are actually trying to get a good education. Common Core is not the way to do it. I believe that Wisconsin can do their own uniform standards for curriculum, and I think it should be done locally. I think that the federal government needs to stay out of Wisconsin, and I think that we can do it better. I also think that we have to include all the stakeholders. We have to include the teachers, and I come from a family of teachers. Several of them are here tonight, and I believe that they will tell you some of the difficulties that they've had in the school system, and they'll tell you some of the problems. It isn't just one problem. The administration, I think, becomes a difficult thing for our teachers to be able to teach in the classroom without having the resources, because the administration is focusing on butts in the seat and how many dollars they're going to get rather than resources going to the classroom. So we need to start by creating our own standards here in the state, including all the stakeholders. Oh, am I up again? Sorry. It just...
The next question that was asked is constitutional carry versus concealed carry. Racine is having a high number of tavern robberies. Should the law be tweaked to allow self-protection at all times? Racine is having a batch of tavern robberies. Should this law be tweaked to allow self-protection at all times? And this is concerning constitutional carry versus concealed carry.
I'm sure I understand the question.
I think I'm going to edit the question a little bit. How do you feel on constitutional carry versus concealed carry?
They're not different. Okay, constitutional carry, I believe that anybody can lawfully possess a firearm should be able to carry that firearm. I don't believe that we should necessarily have to have a required permitting process, which currently we have in the state of Wisconsin. I supported, when I was in the legislature, the constitutional carry with an optional permitting process, and think that that would have been adequate for people that wanted to actually carry here in the state of Wisconsin. And if that individual decided that they want to have reciprocity and carry, say, in Minnesota or another state that has a carry permit, well, the other states have it now, but in order to carry in those other states, you have to have your state issue you a permit. So it'd be a choice that you would be making whether or not you want to go and apply for a permit to go carry in other states. So yes, I think you should be able to carry it, and you should be able to carry it without having to have a required permit.
All right, well, with all due respect, I just think that answer is a little bit misleading. And here's the issue with the constitutional carry versus concealed carry and what happened back in SB 93. When SB 93 was first introduced, it was a constitutional carry bill, meaning that anybody that could own a gun could carry it concealed, no training, no permitting required. There wasn't the political will to get that through, and they put in a Florida-style training system, which requires 4 hours of training in order to get a permit that you're required to have to carry concealed. Now, the problem that I have with what Van just said is he was actually advocating, and it's true, he didn't want there to have to be a permitting system that was through the state, but he did want more stringent training requirements. And if you go back, it's not hard to find, all of the gun rights groups, the NRA, other groups were putting out all kinds of alerts saying, and calling out Wanggaard by name, saying that we need to contact him, we need to make sure that we don't get these further restrictions in. And look, it's not a matter of I want a bunch of people that have no training to be carrying guns around. It's a matter of I don't think it's the government's responsibility to grant us our rights. Either it's a fundamental right or it's not. And if it's a fundamental right, then you have that right whether the government says you can or not. And that's where I come out on it. So I trust the people to make sure that they get the training they need. And furthermore, I just think that there's a lot of just silliness in the sense that I can carry a gun with no permit if I have it open, but as soon as I put a coat on, I got to go pay a fee and go get training. It just doesn't intuitively make sense. And my concern with where Van came out on this is he wasn't going in that direction of individual responsibility, individual liberty. He was going in the direction of we need more government oversight, we need more stringent training, we need more requirements in order for people to have their rights that I think are inherent to us.
Okay, the next question is, to add a little background on this, healthcare premiums have been increasing across the nation, and especially in Wisconsin, and many Republicans have characterized Obamacare for being the reason for those increasing premiums. So the question is, would you support Wisconsin breaking away from Obamacare?
Well, obviously I'm completely opposed to Obamacare. I think it's the exact opposite direction of where we need to go. Now, whether we can break away, I don't know if there's any viable way to really do that, but I would certainly advocate for, in case you haven't noticed, I'm a free market guy, and I think that applies to healthcare. We have got to find ways to introduce more competition, more market forces into healthcare, and Obamacare goes in exactly the opposite direction. So there's the problem. I have right now a high deductible insurance plan with a health savings account. I think that's more the direction that we need to be heading. I put money in that health savings account. My employer, fortunately, puts a little bit of money in the health savings account, but I got skin in the game. And so when I call a doctor up, which I did not too long ago, and said, how much does this cost? And they're stammering around, well, I don't know. And then they have to call me back 24 hours to let me know. There's the problem with our healthcare system. Nobody cares about how much stuff costs because they're not paying for it. And when you look at all of the kinds of procedures like LASIK, other procedures that are more voluntary that aren't covered by healthcare, you see market forces there, and over time quality goes up and cost goes down. And so for the answer for healthcare, and I think the answer for a lot of problems the government gets involved in, is that we need to have that market competition and we need to have free markets. I'm going to take a few minutes to jump back a couple of topics, and I realize I didn't cover Common Core. I am absolutely opposed to Common Core. I'm glad that Van has come around on that, and I say that because I know a year ago at the Kenosha Pints and Politics, the question was asked to Van on Common Core, and I was paying attention because I was trying to decide whether to run or not, and his answer was, I've heard good things about Common Core, I've heard bad things about Common Core. I think we really need to see what its impact is and then make a decision. And for me, where I come out with this, and where I've come out very consistently from the beginning, is that the issue it doesn't really have anything to do with what the standards are and whether the standards are good or bad. The issue has to do with the federal government is not to get involved with our schools, and I don't want the federal government involved in that. It has to do with local control of our schools. So the standards, in my opinion, are more or less irrelevant. I want local control of our schools. Do I keep it?
Oh, you're doing it. No, I have to answer that.
Oh, I had two in a row.
Well, if we could opt out of Obamacare, I'd say yes, let's do it. We did opt out of their exchanges, and that's working pretty well for us in our state here. And I think we did a pretty good job with that. I'm just going to go back to that Common Core comment, and it was at a Pints and Politics, and I remember we were talking about Common Core and the fact that individuals thought this was really something good because of how they were marketing it. And some of the things they were marketing, like uniform standards, sounds really good. I think everybody can go along with uniform standards, and that's what the reference was, so let's put it in the right context. As far as the SB 93 in caucus when we were debating the carry conceal. What was done in caucus, Jonathan, I don't think you were there, so you don't know what was said, but I can tell you this, that I did bring forward a optional permitting process, and there were actually two bills that were brought forward. One was with a required one, and one was with just optional carry, and the one that made it through and that passed through was the one with required carry. We have carry conceal in the state of Wisconsin, and it's going to be my goal to eliminate those extra requirements that have been put under CCW to make it an optional thing here in the state of Wisconsin. So I think I've answered that. Next.
The next few questions are going to be a little bit more general. And what I mean by that is someone was interested in wondering, what are your top 3 priorities in office? Please be specific.
Top 3 priorities. We need to continue job creation. We got to get the Hard Rock entertainment venue done in Kenosha. We need to continue. I worked on the mining bill, and I worked on putting the mining bill through. I mean, there was so much nonsense that went on with that process and that bill that it just didn't make sense. There were thousands of jobs that weren't going to occur. We need to make sure that we don't do the same errors with fracking. Here in the state of Wisconsin, we have sand here that's going to be used all over the country in order to get more fuel out. This is going to be really important to not only the state's economy to make sure that these mining rules are put on solid ground, but it's also going to help our country to reduce our costs in fuel, which is going to be huge for our economy. And thirdly, I would like to see us take and lift the caps totally off of school choice and take school choice and make it a statewide program and make it uniform. Right now, you can't take and cross schools. If you're in Racine, as an example, you can't go to a Milwaukee school. If you're in Milwaukee, you can't opt to come to a Racine school. If you're outside of that, you're not counted in either one of those 2 areas. I think we need to take and bring more uniformity to choice and lift the caps on not only the applications for those positions, but for the schools that are certified in order to teach. And of course, the Exodus 1% isn't going to come into play either. So I think that if we do those things, I think the parent knows best. And so I think that we need to put it back in the parents' hands and make sure that that is an option for them. Those are my 3 top priorities.
My 3 top priorities really all have to do with making sure that Wisconsin is competitive. We're in a federalist system, obviously. Different states have different policies. We're competing with states for job creators and for job growth. And so, obviously I've said, by far my number 1 issue is tax reform and continuing to make sure that Wisconsin is the kind of place where job creators want to come and create jobs. I think it's also important that we talk about the fact that I want to make sure that the job creators that are here and that have been loyal to Wisconsin also want to stay here and continue to create jobs. And what I mean by that is that too often we are using, one-time incentives. We're having the government pick and choose different businesses or different industries that they're going to favor. And I want to get rid of that kind of thinking. I want to make sure that we are creating the environment that we have a low tax, low regulatory system, that job creators want to be here, that Wisconsin is competitive, and that we don't have to rely as much on these one-time expenditures and benefits in order to attract job creators here. My second priority is the education system, which we've already talked about. So, I want to continue moving towards more and more freedom, more and more free market forces in education so that we can improve education for everyone. I am solely focused on what is best for the kid. And I think that it's important that we have that perspective. What can we do to make sure that kids are getting the best education they possibly can so that we have the right workforce here in Wisconsin in the future, and so that kids, when they graduate from our great college system, that they're staying here and getting the kinds of jobs that they want and not going elsewhere. And the third thing that is a huge priority for me is right to work. I think, again, it's time to bring right to work to Wisconsin. It's got to be a priority, and it gets done by having the right people in the state Senate.
The next question is, what would you do to get the common sense change, voter ID, in place ASAP?
We need voter ID. It was one of the issues that I was disappointed. There were some problems, my understanding anyway, is that there are some problems, some known problems with the voter ID bill that had been passed. It wasn't a surprise that it got struck down. I don't think it should have been struck down, but the Assembly was in a position where they were ready to pass a repair bill that would have made sure that we had voter ID in place this fall. It didn't get done in the Senate level, so I think that's another issue. I think that ultimately the voter ID that we passed will be upheld. A very similar bill from other states has been upheld at the Supreme Court level. So I think we'll get there, and we need to have it in place. But I would have been in favor of making sure that we had a bill that withstood muster immediately in place so that we had voter ID in place this fall.
Voter ID. I co-authored the bill. It was co-authored, and when we authored it, it was built on the Indiana law, which did muster to the U.S. Supreme Court and was upheld. And when that happened, we had an activist judge come in, and an activist judge picked on something else that really had nothing to do with what was challenged before, and so therefore it got pulled off the table. Now the Assembly this past session worked on legislation. They worked on legislation, put a couple fixes in place to what those challenges were in the court. This is a timing issue. This is what I would think it would be, because if all of a sudden we now introduce something new from the Assembly and we're putting something through to fix this, it now restarts the clock. Well, I'm telling you, I want to have voter ID in place for 2016. It's already not going to be in place for 2014. So we need to have it in place for 2016 and for thereafter. So the way to do that is to let the court rule. It's going to be coming closer. I think we're going to get an answer fairly quick here, and I believe it will be held up and found to be constitutional. So I think what we should be doing right now is we should be waiting on the judgment of the court.
Unfortunately, this is the last question of the evening until they're allowed to do their general closing statements. But this was one of the viewers today asked, with the divide in the conservative movement, I would like to hear from each candidate how they will unite conservatives once the primary is over.
Well, I think it's all about talking about issues, not making things personal, and continuing to go out and talk to voters and make sure that those voters understand the importance of what's at stake here. I've been there. I have taken the tough votes, and not just one. There have been multiple tough votes. We did more conservative legislation in the time period, the 2 years that I was serving in the Senate, than they had done in decades, all the way from pro-life issues to Act 10 to carry conceal, which we had tried to get through for years and years and years. I think that we are in a position right now that we should work together. We should take time to listen to each other, and we should take time to talk about the issues, not misrepresent people's records. We should talk about what the issues are and how they affect our constituents. And I think we will bring things back together. That would be my wish.
With the divide in the conservative movement, I would like to hear from each candidate how they will unite conservatives once the primary is over.
Okay, yeah. I have said from the very beginning when I got in this race, I think policy debate is a good thing. I think, I can't tell you how many people have thanked me for getting into this race and providing a choice for people. And we obviously, I think there's a lot of things that we agree on, but there are some important policy issues where we disagree. I agree with Van, we need to keep it focused on policy and not on personal attacks. And I don't think it's really coming from Van or I. It's coming, a lot of the divided stuff is coming from supporters on both sides, and I've encouraged my supporters to tap it down. I hope he has too. And the bottom line is that on August 12th, we're going to let the voters decide who they think is best in position to represent the 21st District going forward. And then I am committed, and I hope Van is committed, that whoever that may be, we're all going to get behind that person to make sure they get elected. And I have no doubt, because of the way the 21st District is drawn, that whoever wins this primary is going to win the seat. There's no doubt in my mind. And And so I think, again, we have such an opportunity in this state to continue moving the state forward. I think the state, the voters, and conservatives in this state are best served by having somebody that's going to bring fresh ideas to the table, somebody that has solid business experience and can really lead the charge on conservative causes. And that's, who I want to be. And I'm absolutely committed that whoever ends up winning the primary, that we make sure they get elected come this fall.
Now, before we close, there's two things I would like to say. First, I would like to thank the Outhouse for hosting this event, for their wonderful staff, the hard work they've done with this. They put a lot of work into it, and we're very thankful about that. But the second thing is, unfortunately, this is not a TV program, and we cannot air television commercials. So instead, I have to come up here and work on it. But what I want you to do is I want you to sign up and become a member of the Taxpayers Association, because I get the feeling when I listen to you people and I talk to you guys is that we all feel the same way, and that we all want lower taxes, we all want accountable government, and I encourage you to sign up for the Taxpayers Association. It costs $25 for a membership to join, and that money goes for a newsletter. It goes out for information to make voters aware of the budget initiatives that are going on and what their local and state government is doing. And I encourage you to sign up. You can do that online, or you can talk to Ken Brown, or you can talk to George Meyer in the front here. And that is my sales pitch. And now we're going to go into the final closing statements of this. And I believe, Jonathan, you're to start.
Okay.
And each one of these are 2 minutes long.
All right, well, thanks again, everybody that's been involved in putting this on, and thanks for you for coming. One thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is just how different this 21st district is than it has been in the past. The district is basically made up 50% new areas and 50% old areas, and the 50% that's new is the western parts of Kenosha County and Burlington are areas where I ran back in 2011, where people are familiar with me and where Republican voters have had a chance to vote for me. It's a brand new district. It is an opportunity, because of the fact that it is one of the most conservative districts in the state, to make sure that we are sending the right leader that is going to drive this state forward and really champion the conservative agenda. We have a real problem in the state Senate, in my opinion. The Republican caucus is really divided between, people that I would consider good, solid conservative Republicans and people that are more in the moderate wing of the Republican Party. And I think, one of the reasons I decided I've got to run, and I've got to run now, is that it is so important that we shift the caucus conservative. When it's really the majority of the majority is going to decide the kinds of bills that come up and the kind of agenda we're going to have. And I think I have the right experience, I have the right leadership, and most importantly, I have the right ideas for this state. I am running on bold ideas. I am running on making fundamental changes so that we continue to make Wisconsin competitive. Wisconsin we've done great things under Governor Walker, but again, we're just getting started. Wisconsin is still one of the highest tax states in the country. We're not seeing the kind of economic development that we should be seeing, and we start getting there by creating the right environment that is going to encourage businesses, encourage job creators, and encourage people to move here and want to live here. I want to ask all of you, if you have questions, if you want further details on any of the ideas that I have, please contact me. It's very easy to get in touch with me through my website. In case any of you care, I don't really pay a lot of attention to stuff that's going on Facebook for my own sanity. So if you're trying to reach me through Facebook other than my own page, you probably won't have much success. But give me a call, shoot me an email. If you want to go grab coffee, I'm happy to do it. I love talking to people about policy issues, and I really appreciate your vote on August 12th.
It's time.
And thank you so much, Sam.
Well, I want to also thank the Outhouse for doing this, and the Taxpayers Association for putting this together. And even more importantly, I want to thank my wife and my family and all my supporters and friends who are here. I believe this is about continuing what our governor has started for reforms, moving our state forward. I've been there. I've taken the votes. I've taken the tough votes. I wasn't wishy-washy. I didn't water things down. I was an advocate for pro-life, for Second Amendment, for Act 10, and all of the conservative things that our governor brought forward. I'm proud of that record, and guess what? When I get back there, there's more work to be done. I'm going to work with the governor to continue on reducing taxes like we have, to continue bringing more jobs here to Wisconsin, to make sure that we have the type of communities that we can be proud to live in and we can be proud to raise our families in. I think that this is something that is probably at the foremost here, is that this is about living with our neighbors, and it's about creating an environment where we all can have the dreams that we grew up with. You know, I remember back when you could walk out of high school and you could drop out of high school and you could have gotten a job at one of 50 different places in the city of Racine with decent money. And if you didn't like that job by noon, you could quit and get a job by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they'd train you. We can go back to that. We can have the ability to have jobs available here so our kids don't have to leave and go someplace else once they finish college. They'll have an ability to stay here. They'll have an ability to want to stay here because they're going to be paying less tax, and they're going to be having a better quality of life with better schools and better choices. So I hope that you will consider voting me in again and letting me continue what I started in 2010. And August 12th is a pretty important date. I believe that we can win this, but this isn't a done deal after August 12th. The race isn't over until November 4th. I think that we become complacent, and we can lose this seat too. You know, it's not just because everybody thinks it's a 50-some% conservative district. So we need to keep that in mind. Saturday, we're having a grand opening at 8700 Durand Avenue, and you can go to my website, www.voteforvan.com, and if you have any questions, I'll be here for a few minutes. Thank you.
Now, I want to thank you guys all for coming here. You'll be proud to realize that there was 120 people at this debate tonight, so we're happy to have you here. I hope it's a wonderful job. It was great having you guys here, and I encourage you to stick around and talk with people and support your local businesses.